Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about how you can do remote control of NDI Studio Monitor. Now, this is something that probably everybody that's doing any sort of IP-based production, you're using it in your productions. So we think there's a lot more in there than you've probably had a chance to touch on yet. So we're going to cover that and cover how to do all the remote controls of those functions inside NDI Studio Monitor using vMix scripting. So let me jump in first and talk a little bit about some of the capabilities that are already inside NDI Studio Monitor. So right now, for most people, you can pick up any type of NDI source and display it. It has audio and audio meters, so it lets you not just listen, but actually monitor the audio levels. Another function inside Studio Monitor that is really significant is it gives you the ability to record the source that you're monitoring. And that does it as sort of in the native NDI streamed format. So it's very low compute intensive. So you can do this even on lower end systems. So you can do this on lower end systems. Sorry if the audio is a little low here. Just the mic was out of whack here. So in addition to that, you can do picture-in-picture and you can do overlays. So if you have picture-in-picture, you can have the main video coming in and a smaller video on the side. But with overlays, you can also do things with alpha channel. So if you have alpha channel in your NDI source, you could do that as an overlay, which could put statistics, messages, other types of things up on top. And the last thing you can do is you can actually use NDI Studio Monitor as a redistribution point for an NDI feed. So say you wanted to take in a camera that on its own couldn't support multiple viewers, you could pick that camera up as a single stream inside NDI Studio Monitor and then have Studio Monitor republish that stream for multiple people to view the output of that camera. So there's a lot of functionality baked into Studio Monitor. And it's really something that once you start to use it, there's more and more use cases you're going to find for it. So before we get into how we do the remotes, let me just jump into our comments section here. So we have Rudy. Rudy has joined us. So thank you, Rudy, for taking the time to be with us here. Let's see. So we also have Richard Ignacio. Richard, hello. So yes, the audio was a bit low, and so hopefully it's a little bit better now. So we have Sisay from Minnesota wishing us all a happy Friday. So hi, Sisay. I hope you're having a great Friday as well. So Guy has popped in. Guy, I'm glad you made it. It's always great to have one of the true experts in this field join us here. So let's see. So Guy was also mentioning about the audio, and he said I should use the loudness meter plugin. And I also have John Simon. John's joining us from Montreal. So John, great having you here. Thank you. Okay. So let's see, where do I want to start? Let me go over here and show you NDI Studio Monitor. And this is what you're used to seeing, but one of the things you'll notice down here, based on how I have this configured, is it has a web control URL. And that web control is the IP address of the computer that NDI Studio Monitor is running on, and then a port number. And it starts at port 80, and every new instance of NDI Studio Monitor that you bring on bumps the port up by 1. So this is actually, for this demo, This is the 5th NDI Studio Monitor I have running on here. But what I wanted to show you is exactly how you can get this set up. So in the upper corner, if you come back here, there's this little hamburger menu. And when you click on that and go down to Settings, and then over to Application, you'll see that you have things that are called Allow Web Control, which means that I am telling NDI Studio Monitor I can make remote command-based control requests to this version of Studio Monitor through the IP. And it also says I can show the web control URL, which we just have on there as well, so we can all track the IP address for this. But with the Allow Web Control checked, I now can take and use other types of scripting commands to pass control over to Studio Monitor. But let's go back to the foundational one. This was set up so that you can use just a web browser to control Studio Monitor. So let me call that up here. I think I have this here. All right. So this is when I go to that address, 178:84 over here, this is what I have available to me in Studio Monitor. So I can pick a source that I want. I can pick an overlay. I can set that overlay as a picture-in-picture or just a full screen overlay. I can have it record. I can have it show the UV meters, and I can have mute audio. So this is what's just available currently inside of Studio Monitor using any sort of browser device. And that means you can also use this on a mobile device like a phone, and it should work totally fine. But it does have to be on the same network or have access to the same network that you're running Studio Monitor on. But this is the full suite of capabilities that you have inside of Studio Monitor already. And what we're going to do is we're going to tap into them using JSON and vMix scripting. So probably the first thing to do would be to talk a little bit. Let me close off a few of these things here. To talk a little bit about how we're going to do this. So because everybody's Studio Monitor could be on different systems, and in any given production, you may have different Studio Monitors that you may want to control running on different systems. We didn't want to hard code anything inside of the script itself. And we wanted the script really to just be an agent that acted on some variables we can pass it. And to do that, we're going to be using the dynamic values inside of vMix. So let me open up settings over here. And if you'll notice, this vMix session it's a blank session, but it has scripts and it has shortcuts in it. And this is, so you can see this is all happening with remote sources, nothing inside of vMix directly. So if I go over to the shortcuts, sort of go through what I have set up here. This NDI monitor IP, what this lets me do is say, I'm going to set to dynamic value 1 to the IP address of the Studio Monitor that I want to control. And so if I just open this up, it's basically doing, I'm taking a Stream Deck button, I set the dynamic value as the function, and I'm telling it what's the IP address and port for that Studio Monitor. So this now gives me the ability to switch between different Studio Monitors that I may want to control. And it's very, very simple this way. I just put in different IP addresses into value 1 in the dynamic values. And then for the sources, the source works slightly differently. So there's 2 parts to a source. Let me open this up. Oh, let me get one that isn't none. So there are 2 parts to the source. The first part is sort of the name of the computer or the device. And the second, in parentheses, is the name of the NDI channel that device is delivering. So almost all NDI sources will break up this way. And this will give you a very easy way now to specify when you tell Studio Monitor to change to a different source. This lets you specify what source that is. And we're putting that in dynamic value 2. So from a scripting point of view, we've created a very generic script that directs commands to the Studio Monitor's IP address that you set up in value 1. And if it's for a change of NDI source, we're taking that out of value 2. But the code now will stay the same, and we only have to change sort of text inside of a shortcut to get this to work. So with that sort of as a background, let me jump into the code, and we can take a look at this. So I will open up Studio Monitor here. Oh, Studio Monitor. I open up Visual Studio Code here, and we'll take a look at what we have set up. So because we're still using elements in vMix for the dynamic values, we'll need to open up the shortcut, the XML file for vMix. So we are, as usual, opening it up and loading it in. And in this script, what we want to do is we want to use those two values to change the sources inside a given Studio Monitor. So this is where we just jump in, and we're going to pull out the two dynamic values we have set up. We're going to pull out the IP of Studio Monitor, and we're going to pull out the source that we want to set that Studio Monitor to. And so we're just pulling those out of dynamic value 1 and dynamic value 2 with the select single node. So this is all code that we've touched on in the past. So what we need to do now is when we send something to Studio Monitor, we're sending it as a JSON object, which is a data object inside of JavaScript. And it requires us to set up the URL that I want to send it to, as well as other elements in here. And that's what we have going on right here. We're setting up the URL, and in this case, we're plugging in dynamically the IP address, but the rest of it is set up in a very specific way to change sources inside of Studio Monitor. This is the IP, not just the IP, this is the URI, the full descriptor of what where you have to send those messages to. And so it's a configuration. So we're saying this is version 1 of the Studio Monitor interface, and we're sending a configuration command. So that's what we're doing. We're doing this dynamically and setting it up so we have this ready. And we're storing that as the URL source. We then have the 3 sort of core objects inside the JSON object that we're going to have to send out. And while I won't go into JSON in today's show as, a structured representation, I'm just going to talk about what we're doing with the objects. So the first component is what we call the payload. This is the command set that we actually want to send to Studio Monitor. And so again, this comes in and it's predefined by Studio Monitor. So this is things that I don't really have a choice. It's specifying the payload is saying for this version of Studio Monitor, we want to set the NDI source, and the NDI source that we're going to set is the name of that was in value 2, which is the monitor source. And this is now all structured for a JSON format, but that's all we're doing here logically in the code. The next thing we have to tell it is what sort of encoding to use. And we're just using UTF-8, but you could use simple ASCII. It's fairly flexible here for what you want to do, but it has to know how it's going to read that. And what makes this important is we need to send this data, this payload of a command to Studio Monitor using basically sort of byte encoding. Basically, we take what's a string and we break it into a sequence of bytes. And that's what we're doing with this last command here. We're taking this encoded format of the JSON payload source. So this is what we just set up here. that we want to tell it what to do. And we're encoding that as a sequence of bytes. And that's just a data object that we're using here. So it's something that is necessary for the way we're going to send these commands. And so that's what we're going to do next. So what we want to do is we want to do this as a post request. So this has a very specific format. So when we do a post request, we need to set the method. So first, let me take a step. We are going to do the HTTP web request, which is just a different type of web control that we've looked at, where I'm creating basically, based on this URL that we set up, I'm basically creating a connection to say, now I want to be able to talk to this web point, this URL, and send things to it. And that's what I opened up here, where I create a post request, which is an HTTP request set up with the URL we just specified. Then we're telling it the way I'm going to talk to that web request is using the post method. And then I'm going to actually tell it what's the content type. And again, this is just an encoding format. So it's telling it what format to expect when I tell it, when I'm talking to it. And then I have to give it the length of the content. And so what I'm doing with that, because it has to know when I send it a message, how long is that message? When does it stop reading it? So I pull the content length out, or set the content length in this post request by just measuring the length of the byte source that we set up, which is what we just did in the last section, where we converted the string to bytes. And at that point, we actually will open the stream to send the JSON request. That's where we're doing this, where we say request the stream, and then we are writing those byte source out as the payload for that length. So it's very, very simple what we're doing here, but it just requires a set of structured steps around it to make this work. So everything we're doing here is we write this out, then we, this will, close up the JSON request, and we should basically at this point, we close things and we're done. So, so I think I have some code. So basically, I'll correct this here. I'm sorry about that, but so basically, all we're going to do now is we're just going to close this at the end. So after we write the JSON request, and then we're just going to close the stream. So that was a mistype on my part, but this is how we have this set up. So format the command, set it up as a JSON object, open up a web request, and stream the JSON object as a byte stream to the web request and close it. That's how this works. And so this is basically the same thing that we would do for any of the other commands. And there are a whole range of commands. Basically, everything you saw in that web interface is available as a command you can send using this model. And we have this for record on and off as well. So, I mean, we can just take a quick look. All of this stuff is the same in the beginning, except for record. This is a fixed command, so we don't need to specify a second value, like a second argument in here. So we're doing the same thing, setting up, putting the monitor IP in place for the studio monitor we want to talk to. And we're going through, and the payload in this case just says recording is true or recording is false. But after that, everything is identical. So this is a great template for sending any of these commands that you want to send. Some of the things in all of these, like if you look where I set up the URL, as opposed to configuration, now it's talking about recording here at the end. So right here, this bit is different. But again, that's just because it's a different URL, a different web point that we're talking to in Studio Monitor to handle this command. But structurally, this is all the same. So with that said, let me give you a sort of a general view here of how this would work in practice. So I'm going to close this all down, and let me switch over to here and tell you a bit what we have here. So over here, I have a Stream Deck, and across the top, I have 5 different destinations that I can use, 5 different studio monitors that I have set up here. I have 8 different potential sources that I can take. And then I have the ability to specify a record or to stop record with these 2 buttons here. And so the way I can do this is I can select any one of the studio monitors I want to talk to. If I want to select a source for it and to change it, I can select the source, then press take to put that source on it. Or if I simply want to record it or stop recording, I select the source and then click on record or stop record. And what we have in this section right over here is the first 4 of the studio monitors that I have. And so let me show you how this would work. So if I wanted to take and change the video in Studio Monitor 2, I could come up here and select, I'm going to change that. And I want to change that to source 7, which I believe is one of the TriCaster interfaces. And when I click take, it now stops and goes over and pulls the TriCaster interface for the show that we're running right here. And if I want to now change that again, because it's already selected, I could just turn around and say, no, actually what I wanted was the multi-view. So I could do that and switch to the multi-view, or I could go and say, gee, I'd really like the main camera here, and do that where I switch to the main camera we have here, and it's just a mirror of that. So it's a very simple way to go and do these types of swaps. And this can be useful in a lot of different cases. So say you have a confidence monitor, and based on what's going on, you may want to show different things to the talent on set. So if you had a video call, you may want to show a full screen of the person, but if they're doing slides, you may want to show them their slides. You can do this now without having to think about what's streaming out in the production. This basically gives you the ability in Studio Monitor to just pull sources off the network that are appropriate for that talent. And it can be used for signage in a show, where if you want to go to segments, you could just turn around and switch what you want to have happen with the signage. Or you could do interesting things where it's dynamic. The code that we wrote could be a loop which rotates images across multiple monitors. So you could create some dynamic movement behind a set where you have different visuals moving between different monitors. And you could set that up and have that loop and do those types of switches. So lots of different things that you can do with these types of controls. The other thing that's really valuable is recording. So if I jump back here, say I wanted to go and say, let's record monitor 1, what's going on in Studio Monitor 1. I just press Studio Monitor 1 here, and then I click record. And what this will do is it will go and send the record command. And now you can see over here, I'm recording what's here. And I could just go and stop it, and that will fade. And then I could just pick another source and go, okay, let's record Studio Monitor 3. And so this would go and, basically pick this up and do the recording. And you'll see that, when it comes on the display, that the recording has started. And again, you could just turn and stop these. So this could be something where you have this all set up on a system and can give you effectively ISO chords, and you can in your studio just turn around and say, okay, I want to start recording each one of these. But the other piece to this is that you can use any of the other functions in this way. So if you wanted to do overlays and put different overlays that you could show to talent. So if you want to turn around and have a countdown timer where you didn't want it on screen all the time, you could send that out as an overlay every now and again to say, okay, or if their time is up and you want to put something across the bottom that basically says stop now, you could do these types of things, and that could all be controlled through a simple script. The other piece in all this, because I've mentioned in our last show that we're looking at sort of moving beyond just vMix scripting to other types of script controls that we can use for automation. Everything I showed here would be Node.js, JavaScript compatible. So even if you weren't doing this inside of vMix, this is definitely something that you could do using something like Node and pull that together as another way to accomplish everything. So that's really everything that I have in a show for this show. So let me just jump back in and see everybody else that joined us. So let's see. So we have who else? Crystal Fire Productions. So hi, Crystal Fire, joining us from Paris. That is great to see you. Thank you for joining us today. So so Guy just commented. He says scripting is so much fun. Just send an email with it. Now need to trigger a situation to warn me. so yeah, I mean, you can do, joking aside, you can do so much with scripting that I think it opens up the possibilities far beyond what's inside the production tools you're using directly. And it lets you think differently about how you want to do control, how you want to do visuals. That whole space opens up. So let's see. We have Joy from Bangladesh. Thank you for joining us. Great to have you here. And so we have Dennis van Dalen. So hello again from the Netherlands. Dennis, thank you. And we have Mady the Great. Mady, good to see you here again. So hope all is well with you. So thank you for joining us here. So we're going to wrap the show up today. So it wasn't a very long show, but we're going to stay around after the show for our post-show session. So please, if there's any other questions, whether it's about this or anything else about live streaming, production that you want to talk about, just get the questions into the comment section and we'll jump in and try to cover everything we can. And again, you can, these can be broader questions than just what we covered here. So we've got 2 more shows left in season 2 of Streaming Alchemy. So we will be back again next week for another show, and we'll probably wrap it up with one more show the week after. So I appreciate everybody who's joined us for this season, and we will, we'll try to wrap this up covering everything that we think would be interesting for you that we haven't touched on around scripting. So if I don't see you next week. And otherwise, we'll be back in a few seconds actually, for the post show. So see you in a few. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the post show here. So this was interesting because this is something that I've actually wanted to add to our own productions, and it's just, the shoemaker's children. You never do stuff for yourself, really. But this was something I wanted to touch on and sort of integrate into our own production flow. And so this was just a good opportunity to do this here at the end. And it was a good segue because we've covered a bit in the past 2 shows about web requests and how to work with those in both vMix and in Node.js when we did sort of the brief intro. And this gave us a way to sort of follow on from that with the same constructs of doing web requests to control automation. So I think it really sets us up for where we want to go next season with more focus on scripting outside of vMix scripting on its own, though that definitely is a part of what we have in the plans. So hopefully this is something that you'll find useful as well. And we'll post all these up in our GitHub repository, so you'll be able to download this. And I think that's what we wanted to set up, was really a simple framework where you could you could just plug this in and use this without having to really rewrite a lot of code, but you could still get it to do the types of things you want it just by changing some shortcuts inside of vMix and making it run that way. So let me throw this. If there are any questions, I'd love to, to talk about them here with you. So we'll pull that out. So let me talk a bit about, well, we're sort of waiting for that. Oh, gee. So Guy's asking, and this is interesting, John, what's my opinion on using scripting or instead, have the possibility of adding a feature request? So this is interesting because I think there's two dimensions to this. One is sort of a dimension you can take as a creator. Doing your own scripting can let you bring something that's unique to your productions. So if you have the ability to script, it is a market differentiator for you. So you can add a unique value. Whereas when a function is in the core product, that's something that everybody has access to directly and can, sort of lowers the threshold for adding that type of capability. But I think there's really a place for both because scripting can let you go so far ahead and do so many different things that really feature requests would only make sense for things that you think have broad application. But I think the value of scripting is really around that unique creative side that you have where you want to. I mean, when I think of scripting, let me take a step back. When I think of scripting, I'm always thinking of what would I like to deliver and then how do I go about doing that? So it isn't so much where the script is the start point. It's really the script is the bridge that lets me get to the end point. And that's how I really approach thinking about, writing a script. What would be interesting to do that you can't do with the package out of the box. So that's really, how I think I would weigh this a bit. But, I think it's, I'm sharing these things here because I definitely believe in the power of having a community. So I think if there are things we believe are globally useful, I would definitely put those in as feature requests. And I do know that because, so many people here have done so many creative things that, there's still a lot of space to create that differentiation. So not really a firm answer, but just sort of a general thought process around, your question, Guy. So hopefully that was helpful. So let's see. So we also have Calvin Clark. He says he's just getting here now. So how can I catch up on all the content you have done on this topic? So Calvin, we have two places. So if you go to Streaming Alchemy on YouTube, we have all our shows in this sort of organized, reverse date. And we try to talk, in the title specifically about what we'll cover. So we have a lot of shows on scripting starting back from about, I guess, 7 months ago, 6 months ago, where we jump into scripting initially and then sort of run forward with that. We also have a page on Facebook, which also has all of our shows. The Facebook pages are not always as easy to navigate in terms of finding all the older shows, and YouTube just has an easier way to navigate. But it's on both platforms, so you should be able to catch up that way. But thank you for wanting to take the time to dig in deep to this. We definitely appreciate that here. So let's see. So Peter from Berlin. Thank you for joining us here, Peter. It's always great to see you, and I appreciate you coming in on your Friday night. As I'm used to saying here, it impresses me that people are, open to taking their Friday nights and spending that with us. So we're definitely grateful for that. So So Matey just said he's a C++ developer, and I always add the functions I need because the core software is not tailored for individual needs. Uh, I think that's really the case. And let me sort of jump off from that because I think there's a valuable point in what Matey's talking about as a C++ developer and adding functions. One of the things that you can't do in vMix scripting directly is create function libraries. And this is something that you can do in something like Node.js, where you can create objects and classes and have inheritance and all the things you're used to in programming languages. What this means when you move outside of sort of the vMix scripting sandbox is that you can now do things where you create libraries of functions and classes and objects that you will use to create new things. So you can sort of build libraries, say, these are all the core things that I want to do, and then you use those in an intelligent way with more logic per production to create interesting outcomes, but you add to them over time to add interesting core capabilities. And that's really the model I think Matey is pointing at, where you have this library that now becomes a palette that you can use to paint scripts and to sort of paint functionality without having to invent everything from scratch. And it also means that you could do things where, so for instance, say I want to change a source, I could turn around and set an argument to say, am I changing this source in vMix or am I changing it on a TriCaster? And the scripts then can become a lot more portable because you have the ability to, in creating functions, to create logic that sort of hides behind that function boundary. And that creates another capability where your scripts can be used across platforms and across production. So some really cool stuff as you move, forward in looking at different ways to do scripting and having more full-featured language platforms that you want to do it on. So let's see. So Tom, let me just want to make sure so we have Anderson Springer. He says, hi, just made it in. Anderson, thank you for joining us. So yeah, you should be able to just, catch up on the replay, and that would be great. But I appreciate you making the time to join us here. So Tom Eagle, so Tom would say, could you do today's script in C++? So the quick answer is yes. It was definitely possible to do this in C++ or in C#. Basically everything that we're doing in Visual Basic is VB is Visual Basic.net. So if you had access to .NET, all those functions would be there for you. And so this would definitely be something you could do in C++. And C#, which is sort of closer to .NET natively, but both would work with .NET calls. So let's see. So Calvin Clark just asked. He said, "I've been exploring Twitch, which is highly interactive with viewers, and I have realized that my Facebook and YouTube live streams would benefit from allowing users to trigger things like, like pop-up animations. Do you think this is possible to develop with scripting?" Okay, so this is another piece to sort of the scripting puzzle. If you are using someone else's platform, so Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, any of those, they control the interactivity that happens with the end user. So you can, if they pass information back, like if a user can raise a hand or or when people comment, all of those things are coming off of the platform. So you're one level removed. So in coding those types of interactive things, you can only leverage what's available inside the platform. one of the things that you can do is you could create your own viewing platform for your streams. So you could do something like, say you streamed to YouTube, you could embed that YouTube stream into your own web page with your own URL, and then have that interactive functionality baked into your browser front end. Because now you, even though YouTube is streaming the video, you're controlling that interactivity with the user. So that would be one way to sort of connect the, the, the two ends together. And that is using a CDN to stream, but still controlling the end portal that the user receives that stream in. So that would give you that ability. The other thing, which is sort of generally available inside all platforms, is some form of commenting. So if you have the ability to read comments from people, you could give people a vocabulary that they could use in comments that you could then process for them. So you could use something like a hashtag and different letters or different terms that when you see somebody comment with that, that could trigger actions on your end to happen. So this would be something that is definitely possible, even in existing platforms. It's sort of a hybrid approach, but definitely something that would be possible, sort of as a interactive engagement tool, but without the full control of the end user experience. So, and some platforms do have APIs, so you can, I haven't really explored that, especially because most of what I do is focused on Facebook and YouTube. But I know Twitch does have a fairly rich environment, so it's possible that if the platform has an API and opens that up to you, you could write code specifically around that for those types of engagements. So a pretty broad circle of options based on the platform and how deeply you want to integrate with a single platform versus being more general. All right. So Peter just asked, am I coming next year to NAB? So we are definitely planning on being at NAB. So our we definitely hope that NAB is planning on being at NAB next year. I think there is a lot of pressure for them to really pull the show off in April. But if there's going to be an NAB, we are definitely planning on being there. So let's see. So we have Powell. Powell, regards from Poland. Powell, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it. So we have from Mady, he's saying it's fantastic to manage the back end of the production. So absolutely. I mean, I think the operational side of video production is fascinating, and it lets you extend yourself creatively, both in terms of the visual creatives elements as well as sort of the technical creative elements. Because I think this is what makes this such a cool field today. It's becoming distributed and remote, so you can do this thing with broader teams, everybody in different locations. You have the ability to do so much yourself now, where before, either because of expense or because of number of people involved, it wouldn't be something you could pull off. So this gives you now the ability to really build teams and build productions that tap into so many different creative elements and to pull in the people with those key strengths. So, somebody who's really visually oriented could focus there, while somebody who's more code oriented could focus there, and other people on the workflow side. And how these people interact is really where the interesting piece is, because code can impact workflow and it can impact, the visuals in a creative space and how those interactions happen. So lots of fun stuff on the back end of productions. So let's see. Terrell Wright, he said, "Hey man, well wishes from Texas." Well, Terrell, thank you for for joining us here, and hello back to everybody in Texas. So let's see. So Madi's asking, is it possible? Uh, it's possible to do this, but you open yourself up to uh, lots of vulnerabilities. So I think, if you're looking at this, you don't necessarily open yourself up to a whole lot. When you move scripting uh, to, when you do scripting and you're pulling in data from outside sources, you really have a lot of control about what gets into your production center. Uh, the other thing, though, is that for a lot of people, when they start to do these types of things, there's a lot of people who are looking at deploying components of their productions up into things like Amazon, for AWS, where you could run things. So if you had different issues where you were worried about security, you could do things like stream from Amazon. Amazon has like Amazon Elemental and this whole infrastructure specifically focused on live streaming, or you could just do something like deploy OBS or vMix up there, stream from there, and to your provider, and do scripting and automation around that. So whether you're doing something that's sort of half and half, where you use AWS as almost like a proxy system, where AWS has code that talks out to the end users and to that interface, and then it has a private interface that talks back to the studio. So lots of different ways to do this. And you can do this, again, even without going to AWS. You could just do this through sort of the architecture of your studio network, where you could have what they used to call a DMZ, sort of a space outside the private network that people from the internet could access, that would then have logic that would talk into the network. So there was no direct connections between the outside world and your production network. But this is, I personally don't think there's a huge risk for, doing a lot of stuff if it's web based and you're sort of driving off of that. That's a well understood technology model that I think there's a lot of very good tools in place already to create the security that you'd want. But that everybody has to sort of weigh that for themselves. So that's not something I would ever tell somebody, oh sure, just go ahead and do it. But I think from how we would approach it, it would probably be something that I'd be pretty comfortable. So let's see. So Guy was saying still prefer scripts externally, like applications, and I agree. I think vMix scripting is great as a sort of a quick platform to execute things. But if you're doing this as part of a business where you depend on these scripts and the maintainability and the ability to assemble and test, quickly, being in a sort of an external scripting platform, an application platform, I think has a lot of advantages for this. So I definitely agree with Guy on that. So let's see. So Madi's saying, would you stay away from giving anyone to manipulate the stream? Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. So if you had something where, say you had multiple cameras and you wanted to give people the ability to pick one of multiple streams that you could be sending out, that could be something that I would not be afraid to give to users, because you're basically giving them the ability to pick a stream that's already there, but it's not impacting the streams themselves. So in that sense, I think, this is something actually we thought about doing something like this, where we were going to have sort of cameras on the people doing the switching and sort of running the production. So for people who wanted to sort of see behind the scenes, we'd have the mainstream, but we'd also have sort of little windows on the side in what we streamed, with sort of a composite of what was going on in the production. I mean, we decided not to do it for a variety of reasons, but this was something that you may have something that you'd like to do like that, where people could pick what they wanted to hear. what they wanted to see. And that could be for languages, so people could say, "Gee, I want to go to English. I want to go to Spanish. I want to go to French." That type of thing where you could have different audio tracks that you'd use and do those types of things. So I wouldn't sort of set it as a blanket no, I wouldn't do this, but you definitely want to make sure you can maintain the quality for everybody, and that one person in the audience can't destroy the experience for anybody else. I guess that's a good way to sort of sum up the thinking on that. So Andrew said hello, and he's watching from the Philippines. So Andrew, thank you for joining us. So, uh, so, so Matey's saying he means to give some sort of control to a view. You may get distributed denial of service. Yeah, I mean, it is possible, but uh, that would be something where, if you're doing this in your own front end, uh, yes, you could get that, but then that could happen, with a bad actor once they have an IP address to go after, wherever you're hosting your show. That could definitely be something that they could do. Uh, I understand the concern. I know the issue that has happened on Twitch where they've there's been sort of that flash mobbing on Twitch that has disrupted things. So I don't really know too much on the technical side of what's going on with that, but definitely, if that's the concern, the interactivity you could do certainly could be through uh, different types of interactivity of comments, where you're coming in and yeah. I mean, the other thing also to keep in mind is that you throttle everything. So if the front end is sending messages to your back end, that front end is running inside of Chrome or Edge or whatever browser the person is using. So if that can actually have some logic in it to throttle to prevent people from sort of spamming messages back. And so if somebody wants to do this, it's probably something that's going to happen at the much lower level where they have IPs and ports and they're going to go after you that way for some sort of denial, or they'll just be disruptive. You have comment spam and other things that people can put in to platforms. So I understand the concern in this. So it's definitely something that you should weigh. But my gut feeling about these things is that for the most part, you probably wouldn't be uh, too exposed with any of this. So so let's see. So Calvin said he's been looking for these keys for a long time. vMix Social is unique in its ability to bring native comments from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, etc. And Scripts unlocks these, you know, these comments. Yes, we've done a few shows on dealing with things coming in through vMix Social, and it is very, very powerful. I mean, a few weeks ago, or probably a month ago, we did a show where we took of everybody that posted a comment, we took their avatar and we put them up in basically a sort of a template that showed everybody that comment on the show, almost sort of like a little badge. So you could sit there and sort of acknowledge the people that were interacting with the show by showing their avatar on the side of the screen. So we showed how to do that, but we could take and use what's coming in comments they post, or any other things that are available through the vMix social channel. And there are a fair number of fields that you can pull, and that then all becomes something you can script. And not only can you script it in vMix, but if you have access to vMix's XML, then you can script it in other scripting tools as well. So pretty broad set of options for working with vMix Social, as a scriptable automation platform. So JP Nadu. So JP is asking, can you touch on sending a stream from vMix to remote location without sending to a streaming site? So the best way to do this would be something called SRT, Secure Reliable Transport. vMix has that baked in natively. Uh, and what you can then do is either in another vMix or through any one of numerous SRT applications, you can pull that feed out and leverage it remotely. And the great thing about SRT is that it has a slight latency to it, but for that latency, you get a lot. You get the ability to request drop frames. So if you're dealing with marginal internet connections, you have the ability to basically, if you're missing frames, SRT will go back and try to collect them and reassemble a solid signal for you. So the quality of the signal tends to be very high, and you can adjust the latency in SRT to accommodate poor quality in your network. So you give it enough time to go back and collect any dropped packets that may happen. And so that really is perhaps the most effective way to do this. And the other thing is that there are lots of simple devices now that will handle SRT both in and out. So you could take like have a Magewell device uh, or a KeelaView device. I believe BirdDog is adding SRT to their devices now. So this would mean that you could send a stream from vMix and have a small little device sitting on the back of a TV set that could display that as video to a remote location, like an auditorium. So if you're doing something with like an overflow room and you needed to set up TVs there, SRT would be perfect for that and can give you really high quality. And the latency is when I talk about adding additional latency, you're still talking something like under a second. So, 500 milliseconds, 250 milliseconds. So you can definitely fit this into something that for the user experience would feel real time. So, yeah. So, Guy is also asking us to. I know you asked last time, Guy. Sorry, we haven't set all this up. So we're going to be doing an overhaul when we close out season 2. So there'll be a lot of things that we're going to be upgrading and hopefully improving in the process. So I don't always equate the two. Sometimes upgrades can be a step back, but we're going to try to take care of a lot of different things when we have a little downtime here. So let's see. So JP was adding that NDI 5 seems to require opening ports on the remote side. So as far as I know, uh, it's something that you can control on your side for having those ports. So it's the sort of thing where if you needed to bring people in from a remote location, you can still do it in a studio where you have control of the network infrastructure. So say you were broadcasting from a sports venue or a hotel, conference center, something like that, you wouldn't have to get them to do anything special on their side. This would be a one-sided exercise, and that's definitely true for SRT. Though I'd have to check that on the NDI 5 side. I don't remember off the top of my head on that, but so I think that's an acceptable thing because it gives you that security where you are very specifically allowing a certain system on a certain port to make it through to you, and that's a fair trade-off, especially because it's only on one side, so it's a side that you can control. So but it's something that hopefully will work for you. So let's see. So Mady was talking about, he says, as he understands it, it comes in vMix 25. So let me switch the context here. So what we were talking about is the previous question about being able to stream something to a remote location. So in in vMix 25, they're going to be using a protocol called HLS, which was, I think, originally developed by Apple, and it's a streaming protocol that goes to a browser. And most browsers, you can type that in as a URL, and you'll see the stream that way. As far as I know, that is still designed around something that is on your local network where you're doing it. So this is not something that I believe would work if you wanted to stream something to a remote location. That you still need SRT. The key with both of these, I mean, they both use basically a reliable UDP type protocol. So the NDI and SRT. So that's the point that lets it go over the internet. That's why you can't really, even at low bandwidth NDI, you can't really just stream that out over the internet and have somebody connect remotely. I mean, you could theoretically, if you had really good internet, that would work, but it isn't designed to be transported across a sort of a lossy, non-reliable network, and that's what the internet is. Even a great internet is still less reliable than a local network. So that's why they developed Bridge, is really to cover that last hop in the NDI ecosystem and do those types of remote connections. But that's something that is, I think vMix will have that for the local, but I think for remote, you'd still end up using something like SRT or NDI Bridge. So, I mean, it is possible, that port forwarding, if you did that, you could make something like that work. So it would be, it'd really be a question of how much bandwidth the HLS stream would take, and whether that's something you could reliably stream out. But that's, we'll wait and see. I haven't gotten my hands on the new vMix yet, so we'll see. But they said they will be doing early releases starting soon, so we'll see. So let's see. So Guy's asking me if I need a tutorial on how to quickly change a font in a title. So so if I get stuck, Guy, I'll make sure to keep you on speed dial for that one. So thank you. So so Mady's saying it can be encapsulated in a VPN connection. So yes, and again, I don't want to stray too far out of my technical lane here. I am not sure whether VPN provides the reliable transport element or whether it simply provides the secure point-to-point connection, and you're still, in terms of the quality of the connection, you're still working within the framework that the internet provides. So not 100% sure on that, but that would be something to check, because it's possible. It may be something that some VPN providers, because it's logic on both sides, may add, but I'm not sure. It may be something that's out there, but a good point to keep in mind if you have that. So let's see. So Guy is laughing. So thank you, Guy. So we have David. David just jumped in and said he arrived late today, but I will watch later. David, thank you, and thanks for popping in to join us, even if you're late. Everybody's welcome here. And so uniquely the same was saying he was trying to understand more about the distributed denial of service concern when he's asking Mady. So that Mady, I mean, that's something that you could certainly share. But I think it's everything in this. I think to be fair to everybody, everybody has different experience with securing their own environments, and it is not a simple thing to do. So, for any case that anybody has about what they'd be willing to do or not, I give people a ton of latitude because when you have a production that gets disrupted because somebody hacks in or does something that just ruins the overall production or forces you to go to some sort of deprecated backup production model to limp by, that's not something anybody really wants to deal with, and that can be painful. So I give people a lot of latitude when they say they're not comfortable with something going across the network. Uh, I I can give an opinion, but it's an opinion based on my knowledge of what's happened to me, and also it, the confidence I have in the technical people around me. So I mean, which is another thing. A lot of people are in this because they're creatives and they're not technologists. And as more of these things move to deeper technical realms, I think those people should definitely approach things cautiously because there could be vulnerabilities that somebody from a technical background wouldn't recognize, but if they weren't addressed, could lead to all sorts of you know technical penetrations and other things that you wouldn't want to have to deal with in a production. So so okay, Guy, let me know exactly what I need to do. So I guess I can take you off speed dial now. So 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 thank you. so yeah, so Matey's point was that if you get flooded, you can it could make your stream crash. I think in all of these things, it's going to be a question of the front end. If the YouTube or Facebook are hosting the front end and what the guest is interacting with, those would probably be fine. And I'm sure they have some throttling mechanism in place to stop too many things from coming in. It's also ultimately, if you're just reading this as some sort of script, it would be something that you could manage from that end. But if you're doing this as your own front end, yes, there are exposures that you could have with that. So let's see. So has anyone figured out how to get Google Doc into vMix as a data source, not a Google Sheet? I took a look at this. I know this was something that Guy and I were actually joking about on a past show. That he said, it's all mine. He didn't want to touch it. I have not been able to get that to happen. It is definitely something that I think would be interesting if I could pull that in as text. And I'm still looking at what the options are for that. But I haven't had enough time to really dig in and, to the Google API and see what is possible around that. So, my apologies, JP, but maybe this is something we'll be able to get to in season 3. So, and so Terrell is saying, thanks for scripts you shared on Facebook. This hacking into events never crossed my mind. So, yeah, I mean, in all of these things, ultimately, it is less about the front end itself and more about the infrastructure. So giving people the ability to interact with you in and of itself is not going to be a vulnerability. It's how you can handle different types of events that could come up where people could do things like spam you. How do you have the ability to do throttling and to segment your network or shut people off if you see IP addresses that are sort of saturating the inbound queue? So things of that sort. So in all of these things, these are general business problems as well. How do you stop somebody, in any one of the public sites out there from becoming a bad actor and being disruptive to other people? So I think the goal in all of these things is first and foremost is to protect the integrity of your studio. And then secondarily, to protect the integrity of the production. So you don't want people to be able to disrupt that. And if you can accomplish those two things where, you have some plan in place to do that, then the risk goes down. But as I said, once people have an IP address and once people have, you know, different types of ports that they, can connect to, you end up having some level of, sort of distributed denial of service. Uh, some of it also comes down to why would somebody do it to you? Uh, so you are more exposed if it's a high profile event, because most people from a hacking point of view uh, want to get the notoriety associated with, I brought down the big stream of the Super Bowl or whatever. You know, that's bragging rights. I mean, if somebody comes and brought down the Streaming Alchemy show, I don't think they'd be posting that on their Twitter handles or, or their Twitch handles or anything like that. So you'd end up, yes, being disruptive, but I don't see what we do as being an attractive target. So you never know. So it's something to keep in mind now. So let's see. Guy says how to freeze a local NDI feed. Copy a big file over that network. Yeah, yeah. There's lots of ways to freeze NDI feeds if you are not paying attention. But yes, anything that sucks up bandwidth is going to be disruptive to NDI. And I think this is sort of a different vein than what we were just talking about. But I think as you think about building IP focused infrastructures, you really have to think about how you route traffic around your network. And I say network as if it's monolithic. And I think what you'll find is that you'll be using multiple networks as part of your production studio. So things that you'd want to do as downloads and other things would all happen on one network, and all your IP video would be another, and things like Dante, which people are used to right now, that's all your audio. That can be another network. So as you think about setting up IP-based production spaces, you really do start to look at the network architecture, and network segmentation is becoming important. And that's actually the big attraction for a lot of people to deploying productions in AWS. And that's the networks connecting all the devices there are enormous. I mean, based on the instance you use, you can get 10 gig, 25 gig, and 50 gig pure device connections for the multiple instances you spin up. So those are massive bandwidth, but these are the types of things we need to start thinking about. So if anybody were looking at putting in a new studio, I would at this point be saying, do not think less than 10 gig for what you want to do. So when we put this in the studio, which was probably about 6 years ago when we did this as an internal production studio and testing, we did it with 1 gig, but we have a lot more stuff now that's moved over to 10 gig in this. And so we have sort of a 10 gig segmentation and a 1 gig segmentation in the network. So these types of things, that bandwidth becomes really important. So, riffing off of Guy's point, you end up with, there are lots of ways to soak up bandwidth. And so part of that is have a lot of bandwidth, and the other is do good segmentation. So let's see. So let me go back. So we've had a lot. So let's see. So Matey was saying, "Long live streaming alchemy." Rebecca's heart. We got taken off. Well, thank you for that. There's a lot of people here that definitely appreciate everybody that comes and joins us. So we have Vita de Broadcast. So he didn't watch the show yet, but since the topic was about NDI, going to share a great piece piece of software that I used the past 2 days, NDI router from NDI Stuff. Uh, I actually have heard of that. That would be something that I definitely should take a look at. So thanks, Vita, for calling that out, because that could be something that would be very interesting. So I'll take a look at that, because that name has hit me in the past. So definitely something to look at. So, and he's saying it's amazing to limit the amount of NDI inputs into vMix and control the bandwidth. So yeah, so in the context of sort of looking at an NDI router, it's basically like a switcher outside your switcher for NDI. Almost what you would do with an SDI router, where you can turn around and say, I have 6 feeds that are coming into my switcher, and I just pick what's on each one of those feeds coming in. So definitely could be something that would let you maximize a 1 gigabit network infrastructure if you needed to, switch sources in and out to keep in the 6 or 7 NDI feeds you can bring in on a 1 gig connection. So let's see. So JP is asking, the possible solution for more text instead of Google Sheet data source is shared PowerPoint. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, bring different types of things. So again, the use case, I'm not sure exactly what you want to do other than display the sheet. So if you want this for text, there are different ways to do that. And there are different sort of streams that you can use to send in. So based on limited text, things like RSS, which are native in vMix, would let you take in blocks of text that can be formatted and then pulled in sequence. So there are different ways to bring text from a remote location into a production. So maybe if you can send me an email or a message on Facebook or something, we can dig a little deeper into what you're looking to do with that, and there may be other alternatives that would work now. So let's see. So Guy is talking about use Xcopy and throttle the file transfer bandwidth. So yeah, I mean there, things like Xcopy will let you do that, so you can do things like that as a background. But that's there are different ways to move text around, whether it's full files like Guy's talking about, or text that JP is talking about. So that would be something that we could talk about if you want to contact me directly. So so uniquely the same says, I noticed you're using Restream. Can you comment on using that instead of broadcasting to multiple sites from vMix? So there's 2 reasons we're using Restream. First is we want to preserve our upstream bandwidth, because our internet here is more, we're paying for good internet. So we're supposed to have 500 down and 50 up, but there's lots of times where the variability in that is poor, and so we don't have a reliable uplink. And so Restream gives us, we send one feed, and that can be distributed. If we did vMix, we'd have to send that same feed multiple times, and that would just multiply the bandwidth that way. The other thing about Restream is it does give us some usage statistics, which can be useful for knowing, how many people viewed on different platforms, and it gives us a better sense of where to target. So you get something, positive out of that. But that's really it. There's no, if bandwidth weren't an issue, we probably would do multiple streams out. But there's no real downside for us with Restream in this case. So we're very happy using that. So let's see. So John was just mentioning, he said, for any production environment, you want reliability and stability. Security is an important part of reaching those goals. So absolutely. And that was really when I sort of put this as a stack thing. Securing your studio environment is top priority, even if people can be disruptive to your stream, to the production going out. That's very different from having people interrupt your studio operations. So I do see anything that you do with your studio uh, from a production point of view. There's a whole lot of rules. So it's not just around security is a very big part of that, but it's also like change management. When you do updates, when you do them, how often you do them, how you test them. So all these things come into sort of the framework for that. The architecture of your network. Do you have a workflow? Does your network support the workflow you want to do? Does your network support the infrastructure you want to run on it? And so all of these things that sort of come in. But John, it's a really good point here, is that getting that reliability and stability is paramount. And we all make mistakes and things that we set up and try and do, and some last minute stuff we throw in. But as a goal, our aspiration should always be to be like, I want to keep this network that we're running our production on as clean and as reliable and stable as possible. And that means managing security and changes and all the other things. So very good point, John. Thank you for raising that. So let's see. So Vita, the broadcast says this also helps with stuff like Teams that output it linked to the names of participants. This way you don't need to touch your vMix, Bird.org, or other hardware or software. So things like Teams. So if you're doing something with the NDI router, what you're going to have here is the ability to because Teams could put out lots of NDI feeds with individual people, even though the resolution gets so smaller as you jump down there. So this would give you, because the name of the person's in the name of the NDI feed, that gives you an easy way to pick people out of a large feed. So absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. So thank you, Vita. Let's see. So okay, so yeah, so Mady is mentioning to JP that using Excel spreadsheets or SQL would do the trick for moving text around, and that's that's absolutely another way to do this. So yes, thanks, Mady. So we have Aziz, videographer. So he says, "Oh my God, you're alive! Hello from Germany." So Aziz, thank you for joining us. Welcome, and again, I'm amazed that people choose to spend their Friday nights here with us. So, but thank you. We definitely appreciate it. So let's see. So I think everybody could sort of read the comments, because there's a good discussion going on between Mady and JP about different ways to approach JP's problem and what JP's trying to do. So that's definitely cool. So that'd be something to follow up on. So Aziz is asking, have you tested vMix on Windows 11? What a pity they don't offer a Mac version. So, I'm gonna speak from the heart on this one. If you haven't upgraded to Windows 11, hold off. We've updated it. vMix runs on it. I haven't run productions on it. So there's no, at this point, compelling reason to go to Windows 11 unless you are using the new generation of Intel chips, sort of their 12XXX series of chips, which need the different scheduling algorithm inside Windows 11 to use their efficiency and power cores, which is sort of what the Windows 11 is all about. I am still trying. We put it on a few systems, and I am still trying to get used to it. it took away stuff that seemed like dead obvious that you'd want to have available all the time, like the ability to switch between different like speakers versus headset. You can do all this stuff, but now it's like 2 clicks or 3 clicks where you used to just be able to right click and do stuff. So it, there is nothing compelling in Windows 11 uh, outside of the scheduling algorithm for the new Intel chips that I've run across. Other people may have different experiences, but this would just be my advice. Windows 10 is battle hardened and it does everything you're going to need to do for production. So I wouldn't be in a hurry to jump to Windows 11 yet. And like all things, these things will take a while to mature, and Windows 11 will mature, just like Windows 10 did. So I wouldn't necessarily want to take all the initial arrows from being part of that process. So my own opinion on that one. Uh, so all right. So I guess I want to make sure that you know I covered everything that we have up here. So uh, Vita is saying that is there any other tool on the market that allows scripting like vMix scripting that you're aware of? So what we're going to be doing, this is something we're going to be focused on Vita in next season, which will probably start at the end of January, is we're going to be looking at Node.js. And you have the ability, because vMix as a platform publishes the XML for the state of everything inside of vMix, and you can continue to refresh that. Those are just commands that you can use from any language to find those states. And then it has an HTTP interface to it to let you run shortcuts. So you can use any scripting language that can read the XML and execute web commands effectively. That doesn't limit you too much. Most languages can do both of those things. So that's why we're jumping into Node.js next season. And I think that will probably get you where you want to be if you really want a very robust development platform to do these types of automation projects on. So Mady just made the point that he has been on Windows 11 with no issue. And I will say the same thing. I had no issues with Windows 11 with the software. Mine is just an experiential issue, how it presents things to users and where it sticks things and things that I'm used to. So some of it may be just me adapting. Some of it may be, just poor choices by people who don't use things the same way that I do. So so these are that a lot of these things are going to be personal preference. But yeah, I agree. I mean, Windows 11 should work fine. We haven't seen anything, but again, I don't know if Windows 11 is giving you anything that you aren't getting with Windows 10 right now. And one thing I can tell you is that if you're running on an AMD system, any of the Ryzen, Gen 2, Gen 3, or Gen 5, sort of the newer platforms too, there is supposedly a performance penalty, and not an insignificant one, well over 5%. So, so this is something that, is definitely a, something to keep in mind with this. So let's see. So let's see. So Guy was saying is able to vMix is able to provide high performance HD video mixing by utilizing Direct 3D. It's exclusively available for Windows. Oh, so Guy is talking about why it isn't available on OS X, and yeah, that is true. It can be very difficult to move to OS X if you have used some Windows components that are like, Direct 3D. If you're using, CUDA and in the NVIDIA space, Apple, doesn't, provide, an equivalent. They give metal, and metal is great, but it doesn't, it doesn't translate one to one, and there isn't metal under Windows. So, it would force you to do certain things, differently between the two, and that creates support nightmares. I mean, speaking as a software development company, uh, when you have different code bases that you have to support and try to keep in sync, uh, it can be really challenging. And I think a lot of you probably have seen this with NewTek's NDI tools. The NDI tools for Mac are no way near as full featured as the ones available for Windows, like with NDI Bridge, as just one example. So you have this where maintaining multiple code bases can be very, very difficult. So let's see. So Aziz is saying vMix didn't uh, offer any Black Friday deals, and I think I understand where the folks at vMix are coming from. I think they price their products pretty aggressively, and what they don't want to do is sort of create an artificial peak in how they would sell, and especially if the products are not like outrageously priced. Uh, if somebody's able to come back and give you 30% off on a Black Friday deal, there's a lot of margin in that because they're still making money. So you sort of look at this and say, I don't want to create something where people hold off buying my product because they think I have some big discount that I'm going to give at some other point in the year. It's very difficult as a business. So a lot of understanding for why vMix would do that. And I do think their products are well priced for the market. So let's see. So, okay, so uh, Mady just jumped in. I probably have missed some things because there was a lot of comments coming in here. But Mady just said that on a Ryzen 3960X, uh, the last patch fix the schedule issue, and it runs like a champ. So that's great. I have not tested that. So so the 3960X, is that the Threadripper family now? Uh, so I'm not sure, but so so that's you know definitely that's definitely good if they're sort of getting the AMD family in line with that. So let's see. So Aziz is saying he hates subscription-based vMix. I want to buy once and never pay again. Uh, yes, Aziz, I understand where you know the frustration comes with when you're dealing with subscriptions. Uh, and I swore I'd never do anything with Adobe and the Creative Cloud, and I've been subscribing to it for years now. So, sometimes it's just the sort of thing where you deal with it and sort of say, sometimes the model can actually work, and I don't know. It's going to be one of those things where, based on how often you'd update and everything else, it can be uh, it can make economic sense. And also as a business, sometimes it makes sense because it lets you space out payments in something that's easier to handle and more predictable than doing big purchases and upgrade purchases. So it can be definitely for something for some, but I agree it's not something everybody likes. So, all right, I think we've covered a lot. We've run really long today, and this was a great post show. So thank you everybody for really engaging in this discussion. It's been a lot of fun. So we will wrap up this post show now, and I think, as I said, we should be here for a show next 2 weeks, and then we'll probably take a hiatus for the holidays and get ready for season 3. So we will see everybody next week, and I want to thank you all for joining us this week. Take care.